Welcome to Carrie Bros Pros, the podcast for construction pros by construction pros. Now, here are James and Morris Carey.
So good to have you with us for another episode of Carrie Bros Pros. I'm James.
And I'm Morris. And you know, as professionals, we know how hard it is to get a potential client to share information with us about their project, their needs, and their budget.
That is an understatement.
Yeah. Have no fear. On this edition of Carrie Bros Pros, we're going to learn 8 customer qualifying questions to ask on the pre-qualifying phone conversation. Yeah.
I am really going to love this one.
Yeah.
And that's because our guest today is David Lupberger. David is the president of Remodel Force, and as such, he does speaking, contractor training, and consulting. In addition, he writes a column titled Managing It for Qualified Remodeler. Welcome to Carrie Bros Pros, David.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, nice to have you. Many listeners are hard-pressed to get the most qualifying information out of a potential lead on an initial phone call to make sure the client's project and budget fit their particular company's need. How about some perspective on this, David?
Dude, that's like pulling teeth, man.
Yeah.
That is like pulling teeth.
Well, that's what David's here for.
Yeah, David, you know.
Help us pull the teeth, David.
Yes.
Well, and I'll even do it painlessly. How about that?
All right.
I like it.
All right.
Because in every contractor understands this. You start every morning with a to-do list of 20, 25, 30 items. We never get it done. It just doesn't happen. So you really have to say, look at my time and say, how do I best allocate my time? So number one, you've got to really focus on activities that produce results. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but the thing I learned early on is I cannot go on an unqualified sales call. And I can put a number to it because by the time I put together sales material, drive to the client's house, sit with them, if I'm walking out to my truck and say, I had no business being here, by the time I get back to the office, I've given up about half a day.
You've burned half a day.
Oh, yeah.
You've run, 15, 20, 25 miles, and you've spun your wheels. I tell you, that is a challenge. So how do you avoid doing that?
So I literally put together a list of 8 questions. And when someone calls and they've expressed an interest in a project, I'll say, if they say, you worked for a neighbor, you're a referral. Before I say, yes, I can help you, I always, and this I ask your listeners to remember one thing. When somebody says you can help me, if you can help me, my answer is always, I'm not sure. Do you mind if I ask you some questions to find out more? As soon as I pose that question, every single person says, oh, that's fine. But simply the person asking the questions, I now get to direct the interview. So I'm now in the driver's seat. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
I think there are leaders and there are followers on the dance floor, and our experience doing this for 4 decades is that you want to ask closed-end questions, you want to ask the right questions, you want to be a leader, and you don't want to feel like, you don't want the consumer to feel like they're being led, but you definitely want to have the advantage. You want to know what questions to ask, how to ask them, and get the desired response. Typically, yes or no.
Well, and let me compare this. There's a very similar analogy here. When you go to a physician and you have some kind of concern or issue, a good doctor will sit down and they'll ask questions.
They'll diagnose.
Right. And so a good physician can't make recommendations until they understand what the issue is. And so I approach this the exact same way, which is let's look at this qualifying call as the diagnosis, because I don't know if I can help you until I find out more.
I like that analogy. That works.
Okay.
So let's run through the 8 customer qualifying questions.
Terrific. And so I literally print these questions and put them in front of me because I want to go through each one, because as I go through each one, if I don't get a green light If I don't get the answer I'm looking for, I don't proceed. So there's a consistency here. So can I start the questions?
Sure.
Please.
So the first one, do you mind if I ask you some questions to find out more? Potential client says, oh, that's fine. So the first question is, how did you find out about our company? And I want to know from a marketing purpose where that client came from, past referral, recommendation. It helps set the stage. I may know the previous client who referred them. So it's a little bit of an information gathering, but it also lets me monitor where my clients are coming from. That's question number one.
Right.
So they tell me, and I'm going, gosh, yes, I've worked in that area, great area. I love going back. But we've probably done 10 or 12 projects, just in that zip code.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit more about the type and scope of what you'd want to do. And this is what every contractor has done 100, 200, 300 times. Mm-hmm. Tell me more. And it's my job to really then ask more questions. Tell me the extent. How long have you been thinking about doing this? Why now? Well, tell me more. Are there structural changes involved? Do you have plans? It really is just to do the information gathering that we're all familiar with. And I'm asking this because as I really ask that question, I'm also beginning to understand some financial scope. Because as they describe in my own mind, I'm beginning to say, okay, that's a nice kitchen. Boy, the things they're talking about, this is a $40,000 or $50,000 kitchen and could easily be $75,000 based on some of the finishes.
Yes.
So in my own mind, I'm getting some financial parameters. So I'll ask, we might spend 10 minutes just on defining the scope of the work. Mm-hmm. Then my next question, and I did this, and I would ask this question, may sound a little silly, but depending on the scope of work, and for a larger project, like a major kitchen remodel, I would ask them, wouldn't it be easier to move? That's a big job. And the irony was that people who are considering a project like that, they've already thought about that.
Yes.
And they would tell me, no, we don't want to move. We like the school. We like the neighborhood. We like the commute. We like the community. And I'm looking for those people who have the emotional as well as financial investment in their project. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. Our experience is that, but we don't ask that question. Have you thought about moving? That's a great question to ask. But when it does come up in discussion, it does from time to time, people will say, we thought about moving. We thought about moving, but gosh, we just love our neighbors. We just love the school. One of the kids lives around the corner. The shopping is great in the neighborhood. We hate the idea of packing everything up. It's just, who wants to do all that? So you're right. It's a good question to ask.
Well, they confirm their commitment to the project. And honestly, I once had, somebody say, oh, no, we're moving. We just want the work done as cheaply as possible. That's not my client.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, thanks so much. Goodbye.
Yeah. I don't think I can give you what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So once they've made that commitment to the project, then my next question is, what's your schedule? Because the home improvement shows that are playing on TV now, they're not doing the remodeling industry justice in regards to being reality check.
Ditto.
Okay.
You know what? Look, that's a double-edged sword, really, and I want to address that for a moment. The reality shows and the DIY and the home improvement shows and flip this and decorate that and remodel this are wonderful to the extent that they raise awareness, create desire, and I think in general help motivate people to do things. Having said that, the values that are portrayed, the time portrayed, the investment of energy is really unrealistic and
on every show
puts us in a very awkward position as professionals.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to ask about schedule, and I'm going to give you kind of a simple analogy. When would you like the project done by? Because that's usually some people have some reference point. And when they say, well, we're doing this new kitchen, it's an extensive kitchen remodel, and we need it done by Memorial Day. So I'm going, okay, you mean 2020, correct? And I'm saying this because after doing probably 50 kitchens, being the most expensive room on the house, I know the design process alone, if they don't have a design, if they don't have a plan, that process, the selection process, is going to take 6 to 8 weeks minimum because of all the selections, all the choices. And they should spend that time. They're going to make a major investment, and it's my job as the contractor to, number one, give you a kitchen you love, but number two, to work within your budget. And I can't do that in 2 weeks. I can't do that in 3 weeks in regards to a design and selection process. And that's my job to then orient my potential clients as this is really what this process takes. So it may sound a little silly, but I call this a teachable moment. And the irony is good clients, and this was my experience, is when they set a date for a potential project, it's arbitrary. Because in most cases, they already have been thinking about this project for years, in some cases. So when I tell them, we're going to spend 8 weeks just on the design to make sure we get you a kitchen you love, so we're really not going to start until about June 1st.
Wonderful.
And I would ask them, does that work for you? And serious clients, realistic clients will say, oh, that makes sense. And part of this, once again, is my job to really let people know what's involved in doing this correctly. And if someone says, well, I spoke with this person, they said that they could do that.
You know what you're doing, David?
What's
You're
that?
managing expectations. And you need to do that coming out the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Manage
First
expectations.
call.
What's next?
Yep. First call. And so if somebody says, well, somebody else can do this, my answer is, I can't do that. I know what's involved. So I would ask you to be very careful, be concerned, but I just know what this process takes. So I really want to review a schedule, not only to make sure my potential client is realistic, but also to look at our pipeline. And, is there an alignment where I can say, gosh, we can probably start in June if I know what my capacity, and confirming that potential start date works for them.
Exactly.
And again, your point was very good. This is really just about expectations.
Sure.
Because I don't want to make promises I can't keep. They don't need to hear promises that I can't keep.
Why the question about who will be involved in the decision-making process?
Oh, can I get there? That comes up here shortly.
See, he's the brother that gets ahead because he's so excited about what you have to say.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, so I'm going to question 5 here.
Okay.
And I bring this up because as I go through each one of these questions, why are you considering remodeling? If I'm getting the right answer, I go to, let's talk about schedule. If I get the right answer and we're in alignment, now I go to question 5. What's your budget? Now,
oh, my gosh. What's my budget? What do you mean? Yeah. You're supposed to tell me what my budget is.
That's
Wrong.
Right. That's right, because I can't go out there unless I know the customer's budget is realistic. Now, I'm going to have answers from, we're not sure, we're hoping you could tell me, we're not quite sure how to approach this. And the most honest people will say, we're not comfortable telling you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to know something. And so a really good sales trainer taught me something called bracketing.
Yep.
So if I go back to question 2, what's the type and scope of the project? I already have an idea, budget-wise, of the project. It's loose, but it's an idea. So if somebody says, we're not sure, then I'm going to say, well, tell you what, based on what you told me, and I might simply describe the kitchen they described,
yep.
Then I'm going to say, we could probably do that for as little as $45,000, but it could easily be $70,000. Based on your finishes. Do you think you're closer to 45 or 70? I never had a client not answer that question.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
What do you think most of them said?
45.
No.
Absolutely, they said 45.
Yep.
But the one I was looking for was the person saying, oh, gosh, we're